Hello, welcome to Diploma Sports, an intelligent intersection of politics and sports. My name is SC. On the line, I have my two friends, Ghost and Steven, joining me as always. Hello, gentlemen.
How you doing tonight?
Steven, how are you?
Doing well. How are you guys?
Good. Glad to have you join us as well. All right, so let's get right to it. Today we're going to discuss a few different topics. First, we're going to look at the debauchery that was the Sacramento Kings and that dumpster fire of an organization. Then we're going to look at the controversy surrounding Milo. I'm not going to say his last name, but we're going to focus on his recent downfall and conclude by discussing legitimacy and credibility, both in sports and politics. I think those questions kind of surface themselves when we look at both of these initial issues we're going to talk about. So yeah, let's dive right into the trade of before the trade deadline. That was very, very interesting. Getting DeMarcus Cousins now joining Anthony Davis. It's funny because if you watch the All-Star game, what? Go ahead, Gus.
The Twin Tower strategy is live and well in New Orleans, and not to mention two Twin Towers that can shoot.
It'd be great if this was 1990.
Yeah, that'd be a much more sensible and sensitive reference. But I mean, to me, I mean, it's ridiculous. That what are they both? They're both essentially centers who are, functionally power forwards, with their shooting and their ball handling skills. But wow, it's gonna be fun to watch.
Yeah, no, I mean you're not supposed to overreact too much because tonight the Kings beat the Nuggets, the 8 seed Nuggets, and are actually like a couple games out of the 8 seed themselves. And the Kings still make the playoffs, and the Pelicans don't. That would be pretty hilarious. But if you look at
exercising Boogie from their team is what gets them to the playoffs.
Yeah, somehow. Wait, I mean it's absolutely insane.
I mean, it might motivate them, and it might actually be, help. Be one part to clearing the air in Sacramento, but also getting rid of Boogie. If they are successful, they will have cap space to spend because DeMarcus Cousins was going to take up a huge chunk of their salary space, and so without him, if they're successful, they can grow a roster. But I think they gave away a couple of their draft picks. Did they?
No,
yeah,
no.
The Pelicans lost a few.
That's what it was.
And of course, don't forget that Buddy Hield, who's the next Steph Curry, is now on the Kings now. Yeah, I mean, it does beg the question, and I think the broader point that I was discussing about legitimacy, I really do question what the Kings are doing organizationally wise. Because yeah, I mean, it sounds great that they have now cap space and draft picks, but I feel like the Kings squandered years with DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, they should have been able to at least make an 8 seed here and there. And maybe that's more about DeMarcus Cousins than anything.
Yeah.
But it just feels like that whole city they just completely squandered any sort of chance they have at getting free agents. Because who would go there? You have Vlade Divac, who's admitted to getting a worse trade 2 days later than the trade that he initially received. So, I mean, an executive that admits that he made a bad deal. It's very interesting.
Well, I think it was Vlade. So Vlade is learning, and his miscues have led. He was learning when he got DeMarcus Cousins. So you have a superstar, but if you mess it up, similarly, like Kevin Garnett went through something in Minnesota where he was brought on, and miscues. Basically, the GM didn't put anyone supporting, and who they did, they were just like mediocre folks.
I have two views on that though, because I think the KG situation is a little different. Because KG was at least like going like 8 seed, even with mediocre teams. Now that could be one of two things. It could be Kevin Garnett was a better leader and got more out of his teammates, or the West was much less competitive when KG was playing. Which I think I more lean towards the latter option.
I mean, I'm not trying to compare, the seeding. I'm more comparing, having a great superstar player. And then not being able to support him because of GM miscues. I think it happens a lot. But I don't know why they didn't get along. I don't know what the controversy is there and the nitty-gritty. But as an organization, secure a deal, and the owner was always back and forth on this issue. And so when they finally got his approval, if there's a bull in the chamber, you're going to take the shot. The next chance you're going to get. They decided to go for it and to make the change, and rather live with that consequence than as toxic around, wondering what would have happened.
Yeah, and to that, I mean, to that point, if they had just kept it as was, he did say earlier in the week that he was going to sign an extension, but say he didn't, and all of a sudden he just walks for nothing and he goes to join the Pelicans or the Warriors, or I mean, him on the Warriors would have been fantastic, but that obviously wasn't going to happen. The league probably wouldn't have let it. I guess my question is, because you look at the free agents that are coming up, because I think this is the same problem that affects the Lakers, and we'll talk about them next. I feel like the Lakers really missed out on this trade, but I think Ghost will disagree with me on this. But basically, if you look at the free agent class, you have Jimmy Butler, you have Carmelo Anthony, you have Blake Griffin. I think those are the big three that I can remember. I guess Kevin Love is always an option for some reason, but that seems to be the pool that we're picking from, and it seems unlikely that any of them go to Sacramento. So it's basically they have to get hope that they continue to be mediocre and get that sort of lower pick so that they can get one of the two good players in the draft that are supposed to be game changing. I don't know if you guys.
How old is Jimmy Butler?
He's fantastic. So
Jimmy Butler, I think he's mid-20s. I'm not sure.
Mid-20s. I mean, because to be honest, all the other guys. I mean, they're fantastic athletes. Don't get me wrong, but to like secure a franchise over, I don't know. I don't think any of those three are your Steph Curry, James Harden, LeBron James's type of like.
I do think it's weird that Chicago's shopping Jimmy Butler though. Like that's the part that concerns me. I don't know what Chicago's doing either.
Yeah, Chicago seems like a garbage fire. Honestly, it's like you have all these good players that don't mesh.
Find D Rose going to the Timberwolves right now. One of the trades.
I wouldn't wish that upon the Timberwolves.
I think it's kind of an interesting.
You know what?
Rubio out of there, at least.
If we steal him for a bargain, I think that Derrick Rose has a championship caliber player. He knows Tom Thibodeau, like he can run an offense. So I think that having a Rose-esque, what I'm on the optimistic side of seeing Rose, before. I think he can provide a lot to like a really young core. So it'd be an interesting thing,
or effort. I just don't think his body can do it anymore. I think that there's he's I hate to say it, he's damaged goods. Like those injuries he had that's gone for like 2 seasons. He's not explosive.
But you know what? He has Chris Dunn, who's up and coming, and so instead of Chris Dunn learning from Ricky Rubio, which is great, but they're both young, to have him learning from Derrick Rose, like. Yeah, that
Well, and
that's not the point. Yeah. To me, Derrick Rose can secure the position for next 2-3 years, in and out with Chris Dunn, and Chris Dunn starts to take leadership and ownership. He's still really young, so then you see Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns. So it's like Rose would be a huge compliment to that team in that capacity.
Well, and one thing to note too is that it would be a 1-year contract, so even if it doesn't work out, you get rid of Rubio, which is I think Rubio is really what's holding that team back in a lot of ways, because they rely on him to facilitate, and he's really not that good of a facilitator.
Well, he is, but I think they.
Well,
I mean, they're bad.
You're going to get Derrick Rose on a 1-year contract, and so one of the reasons definitely is that he's so injury prone, and that. Those injuries, once you start getting them, they start racking up. And I would imagine a player that gets injuries like that is going to want years on a contract, not more than just bigger money.
Well, he didn't sign that in New York. He signed I think he signed a 1-year, 2-year option or something in New York.
Well, I think that was part of a prior contract. Usually it's like, I've got a 1-year player option, and I'm sure he wasn't offered a long-term contract specifically.
Yeah, and I doubt that he offered them. But I think that is an interesting. I think it does benefit both teams.
But back to the point, I think Chicago has a mess of things, and why they're looking to shop around Jimmy Butler out of all their players. It's kind of a head scratcher.
I can't think of anyone they have to like replace his production. I mean,
Mirotic, no. Yeah, I mean, really, they don't. And they just traded Taj Gibson to who did they trade him to? I'd have to look up the trade. Basically, they traded him today.
And he went to. Not Orlando. Was it? No, the Thunder. I think he went to the Thunder.
Yeah, he went to the Thunder. You're right. Yeah, he did. trying to replace Enos Cantor, which because he's injured. The Thunder are still, destined to be that 60 that loses in the second round to whatever one of the powerhouses. So it's not that's the whole thing too. Is none of these trades really were significant for the force in the NBA. The only trade that would have mattered is if Jimmy Butler had gone to Boston, they had somehow gotten Paul George or Jimmy Butler. Then Cleveland would be in trouble. But in this case, there's really no real power struggle shift. I mean, Pelicans are still a year or two removed from being able to compete against the Warriors, even with the two towers or whatever.
Yeah, they're not ready. But I think Boston is the dynasty to worry about in the future because let's be honest, Boston has the #1 pick in this draft. Boston has a functioning team. They're gonna get, I think, and they have another first-round pick as well that's pretty high up. They basically got one potentially game-changing player. Sorry, one possibly game-changing, and then one definitely game-changing player.
I mean, if they get Lonzo Ball, I mean that's so.
But that goes to like when I was a pseudo Celtics fan when KG was there. Their GM, Danny Ainge, is phenomenal. He is one of the best traders, and just his IQ of basketball, the basketball world. Like I don't know who does it more consistently. But again, to me, that's kind of like the Boston culture, and that ground over there is magical. It's a breeding like a tradition of being able to constantly produce.
Yeah, and I think this paints a broader picture, and this is kind of, again, like the whole theme that I want to focus on tonight about credibility. And you look at Danny Ainge, like he's proven himself as a GM, and I from what I understand, he worked in the front office and gained some experience before he just had all that power in Boston. What I feel like what we have a lot with the Vlade Divacs and various other, and we'll talk about Magic Johnson in a second, is people who really don't actually know what they're doing. And maybe you could argue that player scouting in general is pretty much just a crapshoot, and you're just kind of taking guesses and hoping they work.
Well,
but I think we really have gotten away from that. If you look at how managing teams, and this is true in the NFL too, where it's just all of a sudden they're just kind of shooting in the dark with these people running these organizations that are worth billions of dollars and just trading, like the Bulls ownership, for example. The Bulls ownership is a disservice to that city. I mean, Jesus Christ, they had Michael Jordan and they almost squandered him twice, basically. So, I mean, it's absolutely insane.
I have theories about Michael Jordan. I think it was gambling that first had him have to leave the league for a few years, and that's just based off his own statements. But that's a bit more on the possibly, I don't know, just the way he left the league and his specific wording of if the commissioner lets me come back. Like, why would anyone say, oh, I'm the biggest player in basketball. I've three-peated, but I'm going to leave basketball for about a year at the height of my power. And I'm also saying the commissioner may not let me come back. Like, to me, it's just like, wait, why? You're like, you are the face of, you are basketball. Like, you are basketball incarnate. To me, it doesn't make sense in the context of what happened with Jordan. Like, if he hadn't said that, I'd be like, oh, he just wanted to go play baseball for fun or something. But I think he got caught gambling, and it was like, look, you have to leave for a while now while this blows over.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just have this problem in sports because we always hold the players so accountable when things go wrong or when things are tough or they drop a pass or whatever. But we never hold management accountable for just stupid decision after stupid decision, and this is just true across all. I feel like all professional sports, and I think it's very frustrating that a lot of the times the people at the top aren't held accountable for just like ridiculously bad decisions. I mean, how many times has Jerry Jones interfered with the Cowboys and been the reason that? I mean, Tony Romo, for God's sakes, probably would have started if Jerry Jones had his way. So there's a lot to be said about that, and I think
to be fair, that offensive line was built under his watch.
Yeah, no, and Jerry Jones has done better.
And honestly, don't get me wrong, Dak Prescott is good, but I don't know how much better he is than Tony Romo. Don't get me wrong, Dak Prescott is really good, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen enough of Dak Prescott, consistently season over season. But then again, I haven't seen him enough in the playoffs, and he played a really good playoff game. So I don't know how clutch he is either, because it's like that game could have easily been won.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, a couple of kicks going a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot. Well, I'll reserve my comments on Dallas specifically. Let's get into the weeds, but to the point of like ownership, and just to highlight that NFL and the NBA are businesses, and business people own these companies, and they can do what they want. That's why the DeMarcus Cousins trade was such a lopsided trade, and the Pelicans won because they came in at the right time when the owner finally gave the approval after, the GM had a deal 2 days earlier that was better. But without the owner's approval, had to wait. Right. So that's where, Jerry Jones doing the same thing. He's the owner, and it's like, where are your credentials? Like, you've hired these professional people to do stuff. Stop meddling in the affairs. But yet they control all the money, so they have all the say in a quite a strange way. The power relationships are very interesting in the back room where all the business happens, and how that affects, the court, or the football field, and how you see players traded, or their moods constantly shifting because they don't know what the hell's going on.
I think
look at our dearly beloved Browns, the source of all things incompetent. The owner wanted Manziel basically, and they got Manziel. So.
Didn't DeMarcus Cousins learn that he was traded through the reporters?
Yeah, he was playing the game, and they took him off the court and told him basically.
Yeah,
I heard it was during his press conference afterwards, because he gets whispered in his ear and he goes, "This is a great city."
Well, because he only played 5 minutes in the All-Star games. That's the thing. He was barely in. So
yeah.
Did you guys watch the All-Star game? Because I took the West -6, and the West won by 10. But I felt stupid the entire time because they literally just didn't play any defense. I don't know why anybody watches any of these All-Star games.
Because baseball matters.
Well, baseball matters, which is stupid too. But
I love it, dude. It's really fun to watch the All-Star game.
The All-Star game was actually I loved it. I thought it was play no defense. Dude, I would love to see 4 quarters of nothing but highlight reels from the 20 best NBA players.
I was thinking about that too. What if they just played NBA like that? What if they just did that every game? Just nobody played defense.
You know what I would pay money to see? I would pay to watch professional basketball players play Lightning, or play side out, or play all these, or 21. Play these
I would love to see Durant play Westbrook in 21.
Dude,
I'd pay money.
Hey, that's what I was saying a couple weeks back, where I was like, you should get all NBA players or retired players to play all these classic basketball games, and do it for a charity or something.
Yeah, no, I think all that should be
keep the dunk competition, keep the 3-point competition, keep the skills competition, and then have some street games.
Were you guys aware that they had a talent competition last year?
No.
Yeah, apparently, I don't know who sang, but I think it was Jimmy Butler. It was apparently really bad, and so bad that nobody remembers it.
I believe that he had the confidence to sing, and I believe that he also sang poorly.
Yeah, that's probably true.
His kind of swagger kind of seems like that, he's overconfident in everything he does. It's just kind of his body language kind of conveys that to me.
Yeah, so I think now we should talk about the Lakers. I think the Lakers. I severely think that they really missed out on a chance to be good, and I think Magic being promoted, and the boy of an actual competent owner being forced to step down, is the result of not making the trade. I feel like Boogie Cousins is a top 10 player, and you have to go for it. He has to be they don't have a star player to build around, and Boogie Cousins would attract either a Paul George or a Butler in the offseason.
I think it's a little too soon to judge that we don't have a star. D'Angelo Russell, you have much more of a case, but Brandon Ingram, we need time for the praying mantis. I think
Brandon Ingram being better than Boogie Cousins, though. It seems that if you're waiting 3 years for him to develop to be Boogie Cousins with a slightly better shot, but not nearly as much presence down low. I don't know. I feel like that was a bad mistake.
But who plays defense?
Yeah, but I think it is interesting too that Lou Williams got traded as soon as Magic was in charge too. He just enough with these veterans taking up time from our young people to play.
It's like a 20, like a pick in the 20s, first round. We can find ourselves a good role player or something there. If we can keep our top 3 pick, we're in a really good shape because we can grab Lonzo Ball or someone like that, or whatever we need. And
That guy, one of those 5 guys from Kentucky that are coming out of the draft.
Exactly. One of them. And I wish they had traded Nick Young for like a second rounder because, like, look, Nick Young, you're playing out of your shorts. This is as valuable as he's going to be.
So since I do watch a lot of college, I remember I mentioned that guy Keene who was averaging like 30 points a game for Central Michigan. So he continues to do that. He scores like 40 a game, but their team loses by like 30. They're really bad, and he just and I would like to think that he'd be really good, but they pretty much just does jacks up threes, and he shoots so much that he makes a lot of points. But their team is awful.
So he's like the Russell Westbrook college,
but he's not nearly as skilled.
No. But he puts his stat machine.
Yeah, he's a stat machine. Yeah.
You know, his team's not going to win.
But it depends. It depends because if he's not making the moves to like get by defenders and create opportunities, at least for himself, like that doesn't translate to the NBA well.
And they're not just sitting up
just because
they're not running screens, they're not running pick and roll.
I mean, the important thing is he's creating his own shot. If he's creating his own shot, he might be a transcendent talent. But if he's not creating his own shot, then he's just accurate.
I mean, he's hitting like these crazy ass clutch shots in the corner threes and stuff. When it is actually close, he's winning these games. But yeah, I'm getting off track. My main question that I wanted to ask you guys is: do you think Magic Johnson is actually qualified to lead the Lakers? And I asked this on the broader scope of credibility. You could argue that he doesn't really necessarily have any qualifications for this job. Is it just that everybody knows him in Los Angeles and he did well with the Dodgers, so we should trust him? Or is this something where it's just you just put a face in there that's good and people know and he'll get the job done? I don't know if he's qualified. I asked the question, completely open-ended on that.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid question to ask because, like, I don't know either. Now, I know Magic Johnson works a lot of businesses. He's done some work with the Dodgers. Unfortunately, I don't know the extent to which, is he just I put money in the Dodgers and then people, I'm divorced from the decisions, or is he more hands-on, or what's his level? Is he just like a funder, or is he like a hands-on management? Now, on the other hand, Magic Johnson was an amazing basketball mind on the court. Does that translate into a sound executive? And we saw Phil Jackson, who was an amazing basketball genius. And, New York is still a flaming pile of garbage most of the time.
Well, yeah, look at Michael Jordan. I mean, Michael Jordan's been okay.
Yeah, Michael Jordan. Yeah, Kwame Brown. That's all you have to say to remind Michael Jordan of why he's not a good executive. It's like, sorry.
The Hornets were supposed to be better this year, and they're just not. I mean, Kemba Walker's okay. They have some decent talent, but didn't they pay too much for Jeremy Lin?
Yes, but come on, dude. It's Kwame Brown. Like I can't look past anyone drafting Kwame Brown in the top 5 or maybe one overall.
I think that the one differentiation between all of those is and has such a stake in LA. I mean, like you said, look what he did with the Dodgers, how hard he tried to get a football team here. I think he really thrives. So he has some business experience, and he has a bit of a proven track record. Sure, he's inexperienced in this particular role, but the combination of what he knows and the determination he has, or at least what I think he's shown, I think he's got a good opportunity to do something with the Lakers and rebuild them. It might take some time, and he might have to learn a whole. Like, he can be a great player for the Lakers and win championships, and then he can also be the great GM, continue the Laker legacy, and find players and build a culture that wins continuous banners.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly optimistic. So, I want them to do well, certainly.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about the situation right now for Magic is he really has only one direction he can go. Like, he's starting at probably we've hit rock bottom. Let's be honest. The Lakers have hit rock bottom.
Yeah, they've been there for a while.
We cannot go any further down. So if he makes mistakes, at least it's not going to ruin a well-oiled machine. It'd be like, okay, whatever. We're a garbage fire and we threw oil on it, rather than, oh man, we're a functioning machine and we just burned it all down. right?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think it's just that it's ultimately Magic Johnson. I was happy when I heard the news, not necessarily because of Magic Johnson was the new GM, but because Jim Buss was no longer in charge. So
we're happy Jim Buss and Mitch Kupchak were out.
So well, I have a question to you guys about that, and asking, should the management have been changed a while ago? I think, what was it? It's the daughter Bus. I don't know her first name.
a Genie Buss, she's
Jeannie
still
Bus, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's still in charge. Well, she admitted, she's like, I should have fired my brother like years ago.
Should have
Like
fired him
this
for the
is
Kobe
this.
deal, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah, she's like, I mean, so to ask, you two, like, what is your opinion about like the history? What is Magic inheriting, and sort of like the whole, what are you asking him to fix right away, and what do you understand as broader issues that created, like, historically?
well,
He inherits all these problems, but some of them aren't really his.
I know this isn't his problem, but I'm kind of asking him to be patient, see what pans out, and because I think you can get some good value if you trade your young players out of them, before more is revealed about them. But honestly, they're on their rookie scale contracts. I think we have a huge advantage if we wait on them and see if they develop, and we tank for one more possibly game-changing player who could come instantly. Because we also have Paul George to look forward to in 2018. Because Paul George wants to come home. And Paul George says he's either going to re-sign with the Pacers or come to LA. And the Lakers, the only team in LA.
the only team that matters.
Yeah, the only team that matters, even no matter how far the Clippers don't get in the playoffs.
All right. So so I have two things to respond to Steven's question. First, just as far as like what I want Magic to do, I think his main purpose, and I do agree with you, Ghost, that he needs to show patience. We can't just trade away all these young assets. Now that there isn't really a Boogie Cousins on the market, holding out for Paul George does seem like a fair thing. And I think Magic does bring legitimacy to the organization more. As far as the history of this, I mean, yeah, I think Jim Buss should have been let go after the Kobe deal. But there's an interesting point that I heard, and it's funny. Levitard's getting a lot of flack because he's like the only person on ESPN that's questioning whether Magic Johnson is qualified, and I think it's unfair. But that's another discussion. Basically, he raised the point that this is a family run business. I mean, they're not like a lot of the other owners where they own, Staples or AT&T or something of that nature. They run the Lakers. That's their family business, and that's what so for Jeannie Buss to fire her brother is kind of a big deal because their dad, raised this organization to the height that it was, and it is. And then to just have to fire your brother. So like, I get why she didn't do so quickly, but really he's been incompetent ever since he was in charge. Giving Kobe that deal, while it may have been great to make money for the organization, that hindered the development of their young players. I mean, basically they just started this year when Kobe retired. And I think that's fair. As much as I love Kobe and loved watching him in that last game score 60 points, you could just see how, unless he did that, they were going to lose that game until he just pulled those ridiculous points, and that hindered their growth for so many years. So now, I mean, the question is hopefully one of these young players, or hopefully one of the top 3 picks, really does pan out. If they get their superstar, then Magic can build. But I mean, really, back to the whole point of credibility, it might ultimately just be luck. He might view him being a good GM and a good president or whatever based on just whether these people end up turning out, or if not, we might view him as a failure, like we continue to view Michael Jordan.
Well, as a GM, obviously.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah, no, certainly, still the best ever. And
I think as far as like the long game that I know they weren't planning, of having Kobe kind of keep the team from functioning fully, but kind of rewarding him for 5 championships. Like, in a business sense, it makes no sense, but kind of like in an emotional, no, Kobe should never be seen in a jersey that's not a Laker jersey. And Kobe should forever be a Laker, even if he has to go to the very bottom of bottom. He should retire as a Laker. And he should be rewarded for all the work he put in for us.
Well, and if you look at it, it's just it made them so much money, though. That's the whole thing, too. As a business, it's their only business. There was so much income that they made from it.
But that's also part of the family thing, that you talk about. It's a family company, and they're not going to have their biggest asset, like you said, go be in another jersey for Jordan in a Wizards shirt. Jordan in a Wizards jersey. It's like what?
But here's another thing to consider about that, right? Think about how the Heat treated Dwayne Wade, right? They kind of are like, no, you're not a priority. We're going to go re-sign Hassan Whiteside and think about our future. Now,
I don't know. I think that's a little unfair. I feel like Dwayne Wade was given a fair deal, and he decided, oh, I'm worth more than that. Now he's going to Chicago and like ruining the chemistry.
It's because Pat Riley never called him.
Yeah, but let me.
He was
poor baby. He got his feelings hurt. He's got a statue already, or he's guaranteed.
No, I know, but let me elaborate on my point. Though my point is that a player in his 30s, looking to go and bolster a team, might see that. Look, the Lakers. What did they showed loyalty to Kobe? The Heat, they didn't really make a push to get Wade. They kind of were more pragmatic. And, an older player is kind of like, well, I'm finishing up, and, maybe the Lakers will be more favorable to me long term. Maybe like if I help bring a championship or two to the city, they'll reward me at the end of my career, even at a cost to themselves. And maybe they'll be more likely in the short term to help assist us.
The Lakers can be happy about one thing is that the Heat ended up winning 14 in a row or whatever they did, and Dion Waiters all of a sudden is a tradable asset because now the Heat are not in a play for that top 30 pick. So Lakers are certainly fortunate on that end. For some reason, the Heat decided we're going to go for the 8th seed, which I never understand why anyone would go for the 8th seed.
Especially with they can't get past Toronto. They can't get past even Atlanta.
Yeah, no, they can't get past anybody in the East. The East is more competitive if you knock Cleveland out. Obviously, Cleveland is a head and shoulders above everybody, but Boston and Toronto. Toronto getting Serge Ibaka, that makes them interesting. I think Serge Ibaka is very happy to not be playing for Orlando anymore.
But we have to ask ourselves the question: is the combination with Serge Ibaka, Isaiah Thomas, Al Horford, and Marcus Smart and Bradley Beal and all them, is that better than Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and Serge Ibaka was?
No, I think the Thunder did a disservice to themselves by trading James Harden all those years back. They didn't have to trade him then. That would have been the best team of the decade if that team had stayed together.
Well, that was interesting to see them all on the court again in the All-Star game. But I think the problem is more of like a log jam at guard for there. I still think, you don't trade away a point guard in his 20s or 30 points a game. And my issue with James Harden has always been his Russell Westbrook's defense is like, it's okay. He'll push for steals. But James Harden, watching him play defense is like, no, what are you doing? Stop.
Well, Russell Wilson cares, or not Russell Wilson. Russell Westbrook cares about defense, whereas James Harden doesn't give a shit about defense.
Yeah, no, I think they're both poor defensive players, but I think they play different kinds of defense. James Harden gives up on plays. Russell Westbrook will miss plays because he goes for a steal. He's kind of like the Carmelo Anthony school of defense of overextending to go for extra scoring.
With James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and Kevin Durant, man, I'll just have a bunch of defenders on my team, and maybe my sixth man will be someone like Jamal Crawford who can just go check up a bunch of threes and make shots for himself. But everyone else will play defense.
No, you just get all three of those players basically. Just leave them on the line and let any of those three drive in and kick the ball out if there's not an open lane.
It would have been great to see the Thunder play the Heat over and over again, though, with those stacked teams against each other. I really wish that would have happened at least another time, because that was such a good finals.
Yep, and Russell Westbrook, unfortunately, did not have the ball sense to call a timeout. Now, granted, that doesn't mean they would have won the series, but, I just remember, what are you doing, Russell?
Yeah, no, it's
that's why I'm not sold on his clutchness. Don't be wrong, he's an insanely good player, but that's huge. Michael Jordan, I don't think would ever did something boneheaded like that, but that's not a fair comparison.
Yeah, very different eras and whatnot. So yeah, do you guys have anything else? We've spent a fair amount of time talking about basketball, and I figure we want to still touch on our other topics. Do you guys have any other anything else you want to discuss in the NBA?
We can talk about the Knowles trade real quick. But that's not even that exciting.
Yeah, he went to the Mavericks, right? So,
yeah, Mavs got him. It was kind of
that's mostly the Pelicans getting rid of. Now they just need to get rid of. Not the Pelicans. The Sixers need to get rid of. What's his face? Okafor. Okafor. They just need to get rid of Okafor now, and their team kind of makes sense.
I don't know. You can play Joel Embiid at power forward and just have him play a really good rebounding / three shooting play.
I mean, Embiid's the real deal, I think. So
yeah, no, I think he's the legit guy for the future, obviously. After he redshirted for a season.
Yeah, it's not often you've had a 7-footer who can shoot that well, and who will only get better at shooting because he's so young.
Yeah. But other than that, I don't have anything more really to say.
Steven, any more points on the lovely NBA season? That's finally getting interesting now the trade deadline has passed.
No, I'm excited. I like that, like Dirk, and so the trade to Dallas is pretty good. And I thought it was pretty funny that Mark Cuban wore number 46 at the Celebrity All-Star game for the 46th president.
Yeah, Mark Cuban, he really doesn't like Trump.
Yeah, he wasn't campaigning for himself. He was just campaigning for the next.
Yeah.
And I was like, geez, you really know how to make political statements.
It was funny because I was wearing my number 45 Trump jersey while watching the skills competitions.
Of course you were.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just it's like Mark Cuban is a entertainment. Well, at that point, an entertainer making a political statement.
Yeah, and also just like a real billionaire, which is crazy too in itself.
I don't think it's that I don't think it's that like big of a political statement. It's just kind of like, oh look, it's kind of silly. You know, he's a business guy and he thinks he can be president. You know, it's like it's not like super important or like we don't like your bathroom policy, but we're not going to play our game in your city. You know, and it's like, okay, but what if, you know, it's like, what about Saudi Arabia and all these countries that stone people? You know, it's like, it's silly to me.
Well, that's all.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a tease.
Yeah, the Trump administration, the whole, you know, they didn't really go with the Obama policy for the trans bathrooms. And for me, you know, it's like, look, if you're a kid and you're 5, you should not be taught about transgenderism. You know, I think that's child abuse.
Yeah, but what if you're actually like having that, like those inner demons? And I don't know. It just doesn't seem like something you need to get rid of. But
my thing about that is like, I didn't know anything about my sexuality before puberty. I just assumed.
I think they're talking. I think they're talking like middle school though. Like
yeah, no. Middle school. I think high school is really where it's like if it's a 16-year-old, it's like. Then I'm more sympathetic. But I mean, if you're talking about elementary school, it's like, whoa.
Yeah, but I don't think elementary school is the main particular. I think you can't write a law specifically just for high school kids. I think it just has to be, you know, we should protect anybody who identifies a certain way can. I don't think they're necessarily educating people about it. And I think it's interesting that Betsy DeVos was on the side of keeping it in place. You know, cursed hated.
I know. You know, even bad people are wrong sometimes.
No, a broken clock is right twice a day. I mean, it does happen. So
I think the policy is silly. I think you should go to the bathroom where you pass for most.
Well, yeah, but if you feel a certain way, like it's never really like if you just make all bathrooms gender neutral, like that's not going to hurt anybody. The whole idea that we need to have it this way because of, you know, people that are using this to attack children, like there's no statistical belief that that's actually happening.
I view that argument exactly like the gun argument, where it's like, oh, if people don't have guns, then there won't be attacks. It's like, well, if you say no rapists in bathrooms, they don't follow those rules anyway. You know,
they're just not like that's not an epidemic that's happening, but we've obviously gotten way off topic.
Yeah, but speaking of wonderful and entertaining people who don't buy into the trans lobby, let's talk about some controversial statements made by Milo Yiannopoulos that were aired about a year ago and were put in a coordinated hit piece by Evan McMuffin and his team of conservative establishment losers.
All right, so I'll just let you get your little soapbox moment.
No. We'll go back and forth. I want you to say the statements so that I can. All
right, so yeah, we'll just start with that. Okay, I will read the quote. And again, I think you'll find I'm much more reasonable on this, or at least not necessarily reasonable, much more agreeable than you would think that I am on this. Okay, so the quote is. A man in a joint video interview discussed Miles' experience at age 14. Another man says, the whole consent thing for me, it's not this black and white thing that people try to paint it. Are there some 13-year-olds out there capable of giving informed consent to have sex with? An adult? Probably. The man says the reason there's an age of consent law exists is because we have to set some kind of barometer here. We've got to pick some kind of an age. And then Milo says the law is probably right about this one, probably the rough age, which is the point that you want to make, right? Is that he basically said that he agrees with 18 as the consent law.
That's part of it.
But ultimately, because he was abused as a child, right?
Yes, once or twice, I believe.
So he's coming at from it from that. I mean, I guess my broader point on this is it might not be fair necessarily, but this is kind of the nature of media that we're in right now, and it is certainly unfair in a lot of ways. You can say one thing, get it misconstrued, and your whole career can be over in a flash. I mean, I would say it would have just been it's not smart for him to talk about things like this, or at least not in the way that he does. And he certainly hasn't earned the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's the important point here too. Is it's not like he is somebody that people look at and go, oh, he's reasoned and doesn't say things that are outlandish and hurtful, because he constantly does. Whether he does. He's a provocateur. He does say things that are vile and rile people up, especially people left. I mean, I think they're vile. I mean, what he was saying on the Bill Maher show, just basically, even though it was just a joke, but just saying, like, oh, I don't hire gays because they just do drugs and have sex and don't come to work. Like, like that's hurtful to like certain people. Maybe people shouldn't be so sensitive, but ultimately there's no production there. He's not making a political point. He's not making something that's valuable. He's just attacking people. I mean, there was one moment where he put up a picture of a transgender person in the audience and basically shamed her while he was speaking at some school. I mean, that's not how decent people act. So I mean, while I do think that this is a little unfair, I do also push back and say he kind of is getting what he deserves.
Well, I kind of view him as like a kind of Hitchens figure, and I thought I thought it was brilliant at his press conference because someone tried to do something that I assume happened to Christopher Hitchens several times while he was dealing with cancer. I'm sure they told Christopher Hitchens several times, hey, look, you can ask God for forgiveness. You can finally, give in and give us what we want to hear. And someone said to Milo, you've said these statements, and will you walk them back? Now that you're being hurt, take it back. And he didn't. And I'm really proud of him for not going back on his word and not taking back what he said and sticking by it. Now, let me explain something about like what he said. Now, him saying, I think the problem is that what he said could be construed that he was implying that there are 13-year-olds out there who can give consent. Now, personally, I don't think so. I don't think a 13-year-old can give consent because you dealing with. But
isn't that technically the libertarian philosophy that how dare the government? What if a 13-year-old is of the mindset? I mean, I'm not saying I agree with that, but I've heard that from libertarian thought before. As far as trying to rationalize things of this nature,
it's not a libertarian authoritarian argument, but what I'm saying though about Milo is I think in that discussion, granted he had been drinking a little. If you're talking about the drunken peasants discussion, but that obviously that does not excuse what you said. But I think he's trying. I think you have to understand. Like I've viewed Milo for about a good year and a half. I've seen probably 100 to 200 hours of his talks. And one of the key tenets of his personality is that he is against being a victim. He is against the concept of being a victim. And the whole idea of him, he was clearly victimized. I don't think his psyche can view himself as a victim. And I think that where he got into trouble is that people viewed that he was projecting what happened with him. The fact that he was molested, but it worked out for him. And I think, he talks about that there's a lot of gay men out there who, have their first sexual encounter as such, or have their sexual awakening in that way, in a very cruel, horrifying, and abusive way. And I think part of it is that he's bringing light to what may unfortunately be a reality of, some probably fringe parts of gay culture. And the other is just that he has his psyche. He can't be a victim. He criticizes and rails against victim culture. He would hate to be viewed as a victim himself. And I think the most important statement that he made about his victimization is that don't let what happened to you define you. You can rise above it. I think that's a very powerful statement that I think a lot of victims of sexual assault, I would love for them to hear that, that you don't have to let one horrible thing define your life. outlive it. And I think there's something great about that statement as well.
Steven, what are your general thoughts on this whole thing?
I mean, from what I understand, and when I got he was telling his story, and I agree with what Ghost was saying, where it's, he have the right perspective, and I watched his interviews, his not apology, but his like PR statement about the whole issue, and on Bill Maher, and like I liked it. He was honest. He said, I was telling my story. I didn't say it in the best light or use the best choices of words, but that is what it is. And I think he did a good job clarifying it. I agree to what you're saying, SC. Poor choice of conversation to talk about, or in the setting of like drinking. Maybe look at it and it's like it was a year old. So knowing how viral the internet is, like that, if it was really something, it would have been something then and there. Not saying it isn't, to look at it and be like, well, your choice of words, like it's a lesson for a lot of people, a lot of anyone in the industry, to just think about what you're talking about, your story or anything else, and how you express it and how other people might perceive it. But I do think that this wasn't all in trying to like do justice, if you will. I think it was like towards Milo and trying to retaliate towards some of his comments, or just his personality. But so like he summed it up. He's an entertainer. Like the stuff he does, he wants to make people think. Like I think he should do stand up. It's almost like
if you watch his college tour, that's essentially what he does.
I mean, because if you think about it, like I was listening to some of the things he said on Bill Maher. I was like, you're like basically a comedian that calls himself a political journalist, smart, well spoken, articulate. He has all the skills to convey his thoughts, and he likes to just crack really inappropriate jokes, but he does it in a more credentialed way of like journalism, or not behind a mic that everyone knows that, oh, you're just trying to make a joke. Right. And if we come to see you and you insult us, like, yeah, no shit, we're at a stand-up show, like what do you expect, to be offended, right? But when he goes into journalism and does the same thing, it's like, I did not expect my newspaper to offend me in the same way.
Well, I've been saying that about newspapers for years.
Yeah.
Well,
I've been saying that about normal newspapers for years.
But yeah, I think that's all, and it's all under that same umbrella of just what people view him as. Yeah, if you're viewing him as an entertainer, as someone, because I mean, it's like it'd be like someone on the left using Bill Maher as someone who's a champion of your policy. Like Bill Maher is a comedian first. And obviously he's very liberal and left leaning in his beliefs, but ultimately he's not a journalist. I mean, and I think it's kind of ridiculous that people are giving Bill Maher shit for bringing on Milo. I also think it's equally bullshit that Bill Maher is now taking credit for Milo's downfall. Also equally stupid things to say. I mean, you're not enabling him by bringing him on. I think that's the whole point that Milo is trying to make on the show is even if these points are distasteful, just like a lot of stereotypes, they're somewhat anchored in some sort of a truth, or at least the way certain people see the world as truth. So
that great statement he brought on, if you don't show up for the debate, you lose the argument. It's that he's always, one of the key points in many of his talks is always that sunlight is the best disinfectant. The best way to go through bad ideas is to have them heard. Where there's danger, where there's danger is when you let
disenfranchise people. Certainly.
Yeah, when you don't let people speak, they become more closed off. They don't have their ideas challenged. They don't talk to people. And guess what? Things get worse. But when people are open, and even if it's disgusting things, I would rather Richard Spencer be out speaking so I can say, what a dumbass, than have him have a cabal of people, and like having more and more resentment built up.
Yeah, and I mean, while I do think a lot of his things that he says are not necessarily constructive and shouldn't be taken as like sound political policy opinions, you know, like I don't think saying that Black Lives Matter is a hate group is while I know Ghost, you're going to raise some exceptions. I don't necessarily think it's constructive. You're not actually discussing.
Toronto BLM member saying that white people are inferior because we lack.
Yeah, but again, that's
just creative stupidity. Like, I'm glad that.
But in that sense, you're cherry picking. It's not productive to paint a whole organization that way. When plenty of leaders,
a bunch of people shot at like a rally, you know, like stuff like that, and then leaving cities in flames. You know, it's like stuff like that.
But again, you're using anecdotal evidence. The broader point is,
how many riots? How many times we have people marching in this on the freeway, you know, and blocking traffic and, you know, constricting other normal people's lives? I mean, like
Martin Luther King blocked traffic all the time. I mean, that's just protesting. But regardless, it doesn't make them a hate group. They're just
but there was legitimate systemic injustice versus Martin Luther King. That's the difference between then and today.
Well, you would argue that there's less systemic. You know, there was more.
It was literally enshrined in law.
There's a lot enshrined in law. We'll touch on racism on a whole other topic.
Race will be another entertaining topic.
We need to deconstruct that completely because I think it's absurd that you're saying that it's different.
I say it's completely fundamentally different than it was in the time of Martin Luther King. The world has changed.
It hasn't changed that much.
Yes, it has. It has fundamentally changed to an amazing degree. Unbelievably.
I couldn't disagree more, but we don't have time to talk about that this time. So we'll save that for another time.
But let me say though, let me defend one of the controversial things he said. I think I've heard it brought up out of context a lot on Bill Maher, I think specifically, where he said that a lot of people interpreted what he said as that transgender people victimize people to the most degree, but his statement was specifically transgender people are disproportionately involved in sexual crimes, which is true, but that doesn't mean they're the perpetrators. And I think the problem is a lot of people just immediately assumed, oh, that means they're perpetrators. No, they're perpetrators and victims at a disproportionate rate when you combine that.
Yeah, well, and I think this is all important because it's the hypertensive world that we live in where you say something. I'm hearing myself right now on yours or someone's.
I'm not hearing you double, but
all right. Well, anyways, I'll continue. This is just kind of the climate, the social media 24-hour climate that we for some reason that I don't quite that I think is just kind of unfortunate. And it kind of does silence people and make it so that we aren't hearing. We aren't actually, because the discussion that we just had surrounding Black Lives Matter is much more valuable than anything where somebody's just saying, oh, that's hateful, don't talk. Because at least then I'm arguing with you. And I think we bully people who into sort of submission as far as not actually talking online, and you can say one comment and your whole career gets ruined. And I think that's unfair. I think your body of work should be more of a representation, and I think that moving forward is very scary because you know, you get one little gaffe. One classic example of this is, I don't know if you guys saw the Steve Martin quote or a Steve Martin tweet about Carrie Fisher after she passed away, where he said basically she was like the most, you know, beautiful and intelligent, or he said something of that nature, but because he said beautiful second, a lot of people, you know, had a
beautiful first, right?
About it.
Her intelligence came second to her beauty.
And it's just like, you know, come on, like that's not, and that's one thing I do agree with Bill Maher about is the political correctness is stupid in a lot of ways, and it's gone ridiculously too far in so many fashions. I mean, there is a difference between yelling the N-word at a black person and every white person getting offended by black jokes. I mean, it's really only the people who are actually hurt by those jokes should be offended by them. Personally, I mean, that's just how I feel in general. And for these people to supposedly think that they're liberals or that they're righteous because they're, you know, attacking celebrities who say the wrong thing. I don't know. I just feel like we should actually focus on real issues.
It's very fashionable to keep people in line with this soft hair.
Well, and as Milo said in the interview, you know, actually, which I agree with, is words don't necessarily actually hurt people. You know, really actual actions hurt people. You know, whether it's, if you want to look at something where it comes to black people, it's really systemic racism that's the problem. It's not people using bad slurs.
But hold on, but there's some to. I agree. Yes, words are words, but words build a narrative, and a narrative builds a framework of how you perceive the world. And if that is built with, indoctrination of off what Milo said about gays. So if you don't know any gays and you constantly hear that and these jokes or these stereotypes, and then you meet someone and they say, oh, you figure out that they're gay, you're going to have all these assumptions about them. That's subconsciously, that's a narrative that's been given to you. So that's where you're going to apply it to your perspective. So there's a danger to, when I look at it and saying, again, if you do it as a comedian in certain channels where you put in a framework as a joke and trying to be provocative to critically or make people think critically, that's one thing. But to do it in, like, to me, his way, it's like, I think that's kind of dangerous if you're spewing a narrative challenging.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally
a certain issue.
Well, I think the problem is more fundamental. I think the problem is that when we teach these days, we don't teach critical thinking to the degree that we should, that we need to be taught.
Well, so hold on. So one thing is, like, okay, I can go ahead and be as he can. I like how he challenges people and on the topics of that about structural change and all of these critical things. But then when you make some of the comments that just propagate a stereotype and don't move us forward in our thought process, but are more just a headline or just to get a kick out of us, that's what I have a problem with. Because it's like, if you're not pushing critical thinking, you're just trying to at me or just annoy me with something else. Like, that's not, there's no need for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think
that's what I kind of
with both of you. I mean, because yes, we need to be, as a society, better at discerning what's sarcasm and what's a joke, but also the people who are speaking have a responsibility to try to bring something to the table. I mean, it is dangerous if you have, like, for example, violence against minorities, and this is propagated by somebody making claims about Mexicans being lazy or black people being criminals, and then this leads to police officers having those sort of biases going in because they hear it over and over again.
I understand what you're saying. Everyone should be judged as an individual.
Yeah, but ultimately these things do matter, and people with public voices. I mean, that's why it does matter when the president says certain things that are construed and could be construed as hateful and offensive. I don't want to get into that discussion about our president because I'm sick of talking about him. But basically, it does matter. It does matter.
Could have been my son. Let's burn a city and completely not wait for the facts to come out. Very, very intelligent way to talk, folks.
I mean, he was distinguished. I mean, he was never a bully.
God, you can keep your doctor. all the fun promises are.
Yeah,
he was fun to watch off teleprompter.
I respect our president that we had. I don't respect the president we had now, but we can.
I have no respect for someone that wants to destroy my society and way of life.
I'm sure, because that's totally what Obama wants to do. Take all your guns.
No, he tried. I mean, he said as soon as he was elected president, I want to fundamentally alter this country.
Yeah, and he totally did. He totally fundamentally altered it.
No, thank goodness we had Republicans to stop him.
Steve Bannon's conversation. Who was it with?
But
it's pretty recent. I know he just talked about, Steve Bannon talked about, like, basically the New World Order and the fundamental changes he's trying to.
Yeah, Steve Bannon's a scary one, not Obama. I mean, let's be real.
Yeah.
Obama has the power. Steve Bannon still has to convince Trump.
Yeah, Trump doesn't. Trump will just do whatever he says.
I mean, but Steve Bannon is very.
You guys know anything about
Steve
Bannon? Do you know, like, his project he worked on where he, like, literally can help construct, like, this society closed off from the world to help astronauts? Like, you know some of the stuff he's done, right? He's like he was a.
I also know that the website that he used to propagate in the vial that Breitbart's produced. I also know that what he said about the media being the enemy, which if anytime anybody in the administration is saying the media is the enemy, they're the opposition party. That's really dangerous because the media is not the opposition party. They're the check on the bullshit that's spewing from his mouth. So
yeah, media is a left-wing tool that did not criticize Obama while he was murdering people.
It criticized him plenty. I think that's an unfair.
I'm just saying they single-handedly helped eliminate the anti-war movement as long as we have a Democrat in office. All right.
I don't think that's
covered up. Eric Holder was held in contempt of court, the first ever administration official to ever be held in contempt of court, and there was almost no outrage on the media. It just disappeared.
I don't know. I think I saw stories on it, but again, we're getting way off.
I'm saying the media used to do their job. The problem is they're a left-wing tool right now.
And to me, I think that's just an excuse that the right can use to not justify reporting. If you look at the situation in Russia, this is a very crucial moment where we need to have legitimate reporting so we know what's going on. Basically, we're having elections fixed by Russia.
No, we're not having elections fixed by Russia. You have no evidence of this.
We have evidence that they talked about with high ranking.
Discussed after the election, as a transition team does with foreign world leaders.
You can't
like bullshit sanctions done by alarmist presidents who have no evidence for an election being hacked.
I mean, there seems to be some evidence of it, but we need.
Where is your evidence?
They're not the opposition party because they're looking into it.
No, I'm not saying it's bad to look into it, but they report it almost as if it's fact. It's insane to me.
I mean, they should have
an amazing level of assertion.
The Republicans need to actually have an investigation. I'm hearing myself again.
A little bit, but wait, investigate into what?
What? How high did this go? There's
what is there to investigate? Like, do you have
plenty of intelligence officials that are afraid to tell Trump things because they don't trust that he's not going to leak it. That's one point, a side point.
They're the ones who are leaking it. They leaked the Flynn tape.
Yeah, because it's very.
They're the ones leaking it. They're all the Obama administration officials that are trying to undermine the president of the United States.
I'm ultimately worried about Putin being able to blackmail Trump. I mean, it's.
What do you think they had on the Clintons? They hacked. Our entire government's database was hacked, right? You know where we keep all the secrets and dirt we have on our politicians? That's been hacked by the Chinese.
Yeah, and Trump asked him to do it. It's not.
That was years ago. No, that was years ago.
He said it during his campaign for Russia to basically commit espionage. He said that during a campaign speech. There's plenty of here that's suspicious.
There's a difference between a joke, which that clearly was. That was clearly done in jest.
Yeah.
That was clearly done in jest because that's just too insane.
Yeah, but then I guess pointing back to Stephen's previous word, like, yeah, you can say it's in jest, but these things matter. When someone's running for president, you don't say those kind of things in jest. It's not appropriate. It's not credible. He's not a credible
building
person.
A narrative. You're building.
He's creating falsities.
What's the falsity he's creating?
Well, he just does that all the time. I mean, we can the list can go on as far as
Look, the problem with the student comments is he was commenting from the future.
Well, no, but he's also talking about it's the highest crime rates in 50 years. He said and that's not true.
Major cities, yes. He needs
but he didn't say that. You have to hold him accountable for what he says. He didn't say that. He said crime rate is the highest ever across the country.
Listen, you understand, right? You can get more people informed by telling a mistruth than by telling the truth. That's the sad part. The sad part is that if you tell a lie with some truth in it, people will correct you, and then people will be more informed. I think we're better off.
But he was just lying. He's just lying. That's why Kellyanne Conway's not allowed to talk on TV anymore because she's lied.
I think you're underestimating.
Are you? Wait, that I'm sorry. That makes no sense. So you're saying that Trump's lies are actually spreading more truth?
Yes.
Instead of him just
because he could say,
instead of him just blatantly just telling the damn truth.
No,
right.
Look.
But listen. He could say that 50% of murders in the U.S. No, wait. Let me explain the logic of this. He could say that 50% of the murders in the U.S. are committed by African Americans, and the media would just go, whatever, we're not going to talk about it. But if he says 60%, they're going to go, aha, no, it's 50%. And then the media has to report it because they have to report it then. But if you just say 50, then you go, okay, whatever, the president made statements today.
Cool. It just seems like a wide rationalization.
But Trump's doing that
more than anybody else.
But so Trump signs an executive order or does this and that, and that's the real issue. And then he goes on and says, "Oh yeah, the rate is actually 99%." And I was like, "That's not true. Nothing can be 99%." But
yeah, he wants the actual
necessarily. It's not
40%.
So I don't think it's always something where it's like, shed light on this topic.
Well, I
and
don't
lie
think
about it
that
to do
100%.
it. That
But
to me,
I
that
think
is
there's value to that.
like in what educational mindset is that at all appropriate to share knowledge?
Well, you have to understand,
No
it's a way
fundamental
to get
sense.
It's a way to get information out.
It,
It's a way to get
But it's not-
information
it's
out.
a way to
bullshit.
Yeah,
No, it's a way to
That's
propagate
bullshit.
information, because if you know the
propagate
media won't
false
report on anything that
information.
But see,
favorably.
that's not true. The saying the whole media won't report narrative is just a lie. That's just a way to make a bogus.
You know that the media does not report on you favorably, and
You can't say that there's a liberal media.
The thing they love to report most is a correction. And
But
if you
how
know
can-
that,
how
you
can
can
you-
use that to your advantage.
But Ghost, here, let me just ask you a question.
Oh, how could you use it to your advantage?
No, I'm saying that's how you use it to your advantage. You have to understand the people working against you, what they desire most, and they desire to try and erode your credibility. But you can
just
information.
He's using it as a political ploy, because think about it. They're jumping to everything. If Trump knows that if he says something ridiculous, that'll be the headline for the day. And he does that at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And so he can go do other things, so one afternoon he can go sign all these, crazy executive orders or hire all these people who might be horribly unqualified, who need issues we really need to be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very alarming.
Asking a black reporter to set a meeting with the African American caucus dominates the news cycle, and that's important. Yes, sure, but that's not relevant when it comes to all the other issues of the Supreme Court nomination, of all the appointments, of all the international. I mean, we should be talking about what's happening with North Korea. We should be talking about, Flynn. So to me, he uses it to talk about these ludicrous topics, talking about substantial issues.
I think
I don't really agree with you.
I think what's her name on Morning Joe, Mika Brzezinski, put it right. When she said, the president is subverting us and trying to control what people think. That's our job. I think she put it best.
Yeah, but see, I just want to deconstruct this whole idea of the media being a left-wing tool. I think that's absolutely bullshit. There's no evidence of that. Now, you could say that CNN certainly gave favor, and I'm not going to say that CNN is not certainly biased or a little bit left.
97% of journalists report donating to Hillary Clinton.
But that's not the. It doesn't. You can have bias. What matters is how you report. And journalists take this stuff seriously. They go to school to learn how to report. You can have a bias. You can have an opinion as a journalist, and that doesn't mean that everything that you report is just a tool of the left wing. You can still report the truth.
I saw a news article, right? And there was a newspaper reporting a news article, right? And they had two different areas. They had one that was Republican and one that was Democrat. The article for the Democrats, Trump getting tough on immigration. The article for the Republicans, Trump going soft on immigration. Same article, different headlines for different locales.
Well,
that's obviously framing the narrative in ways that are favorable for your political allies.
Well, yeah, and that's not good. We shouldn't be opposed to that. But the whole point is that 5 major companies control most of the media that we have, unless you're specifically talking about like the Young Turks, or these sort of private media. But those aren't. That isn't news. That is.
The Young Turks are like. I mean, I think the Young Turks have.
It's just like Breitbart.
Don't watch them anymore.
Stuff. It's not actual journalism, and that's the whole thing. Is there is a difference between journalism and pointing to credibility. There is a difference between credible, actual news sources that have real reporting and real backed up, verifiable sources, and it's just ridiculous because in the end, no real liberal progressive news exists in any sort of major outlet because they're all funded by billionaires. Billionaires who need ad time.
I'm going to push back.
So even CNN, even as liberal and as CNN and MSNBC as you think they are, they're still not actually reporting on real progressive issues. They still rarely talked about Standing Rock. They still rarely talk about income inequality, like maybe in certain little pockets, but they don't. It's not actually liberal. It's just sometimes though, Trump looks like a fucking idiot, and they report on that because he does, and he lies a lot. He gets caught lying a lot, and that's just undeniable. He's our least credible president that we've ever had, and the media is calling him on it. It doesn't mean the media is against Trump. It just means that the media is calling him on it because he's saying things that are just blatantly untrue all the time, every day. And to Steven's point, he might be distracting us, but ultimately that's still happening.
There's something fundamentally wrong with one of your statements, and that is liberal progressive. I mean, those are two insanely different ideas. For one, progressivism is about using the state to grab and take tons of power and put regulations on people.
But see, that's your opinion, and I'm not interested in titles. Titles are stupid. We don't need to.
And here's my other thing. No, the media is definitely against Trump. Is Trump honest? Often.
The media was definitely plenty against Obama. The media plenty touched upon Obama. The media was plenty critical of every president.
Where? When did I ever hear about criticism of his drone policy? In the mainstream,
I heard plenty from. Well, that's the point, though. That's the left wing are against drones too. There's real agreement there between the left and the right. But if you want to look at maybe the status quo or the moderate conservative, the moderate Republican, the moderate Democrat, maybe that's in the middle. But to say that it's radical and leftist is just absurd. It's just not true.
Where is the media correcting people when they say, "Oh, look, the ACA got more people on private on health insurance plans"? But no, 6 million people lost their health insurance, and 14 million more people got on Medicaid. Like, it did nothing. It just made more people.
I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of people at town halls that are really mad because they're going to lose their insurance, and the Republicans aren't offering a real alternative to it. So I don't think the numbers are right on that one.
I think you're insane about that. Okay, look, companies want to insure people. All right, and it's an insane minority.
But if they can't afford to
pre-existing conditions,
then they still need to not. We still need to not leave people out to dry, and we can't cut people out for pre-existing. But
there's an insanely few amount of people that have these pre-existing conditions that keep them from getting affordable health care.
All right. Well, we are running out of time, so let's just wrap this up a little bit. I guess my little final point, and then I'll let you guys say your final pieces. I don't need to get the last word. But I guess my final point, and just kind of summing up everything we've been talking about, is I think there is really still a need for credibility in this society. And as I have plugged in my recent article that I've written, I think that we see that a lot, whether it's Magic Johnson, who just seems underqualified to be the now leading the Lakers, or Vlade Divac making all these crazy decisions, or if you look at people using Milo as a form to really as their news rather than just entertainment. I think as a society we need to focus more on finding real truths and real credible sources. And to your point, Ghost, I think we really need to actually start thinking more critically and really, everything you hear, you should verify it from at least 1 to 2 other sources, and make sure, that the sources that are coming from have real data, have and something that's verifiable, that's nonpartisan. And I think that's really important moving forward. I think we all need to do our best to be more cognizant and more critical of what we're reading and what we're learning. And see things from both angles, of course, but sometimes there isn't always 2 sides to every story. So yeah, that is my final thoughts. Steven, you wanna conclude?
Yeah, I mean, we covered a whole lot. Don't really have too many closing thoughts. I think that NBA trade deadlines, that was cool. We'll see what happens there. Milo, I know he won't stop, so I'm curious to see what else he's going to say to insult us all. And as far as the Trump organization, it's becoming increasingly harder to kind of stay on top of all the issues. So my real thing is, to all of it, don't let your first thought or first source direct your emotion or your thought. Be patient, and patience is really critical in all of this, to seek out the information and to also weed out the noise of what's distracting you from the real truth. So it's pretty much it. Patience and more knowledge.
All right,
I guess.
And I'll just say, as the Trump dossier proved to us, and a lot of other things, I think the media does have a bias. I don't think it's just against Trump, but I think it's strongly against Trump. And I think it's important to understand it in a more modern context, because we have to understand that the opposition to Trump is not for his character. It would be nice if that's what it was. It'd be nice if they were criticizing more his bloviating and his, some of his verifiably false statements. But I think sometimes he does that intentionally. But there are his policies that threaten a lot of people who make a lot of money. When he threatens trade policies, there are a lot of very wealthy people who make a lot of money, and a lot of people that would have really benefited from the corporatist policies from the TPP, and a lot of people who currently benefit from NAFTA and unfettered immigration, like Carlos Slim. and all the remittances that unfetteredly go back untaxed back to their countries. I think the opposition, I think there's a bit of astroturfing, you know, the Antifa types who go and they cause trouble and put on masks so that they can harass and assault people. But I think that fundamentally a lot of the fact that Trump was not chosen by donors, the fact that he was not chosen by essentially, you know, rich elite says, okay, fine, you'll be our red version, our red uniparty guy to go in there. I think he is a big threat. But I also see that as why he has the most potential to do good, is that he doesn't need to make the situation terrible. He doesn't need to create a pool of, you know, docile laborers who have high regulation and poor employment opportunity who can barely afford to purchase the products they make. You know, he doesn't have to do those things. He has the most potential to do good. Someone that like Obama and Bush and Clinton didn't have that opportunity because they were all chosen by donors. They were all chosen essentially as safe candidates. And I think that is where a lot of the vitriol comes against him, is that he's threatening legitimately valuable business enterprises out there, you know, like major news corporations. So what I would say is, yes, when the president is wrong, you should say that he's wrong. You should, you know, correct them. You should look at the real facts. You should, rather than just also posting a correction, have a discussion, you know, have a discussion about what he's talking about and try to figure out, you know, does he mean more? Is he just making a mistake? Did he misread a report or something? You know, he's not a researcher. You know, I do research myself, so I understand some of the ins and outs of it, but I can understand why someone who doesn't go through that might not understand it. But that doesn't excuse being irresponsible, obviously. So, you know, look at what he says, have discussions about it, be rational. You know, and don't just yell at people. You know, have a discussion and try to always change others and your own mind. That's I guess that'll be my piece.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with that. I think you made some valid points. You also said a lot of things that I would like to argue, but we don't have time.
Yes, we'd like to get to sleep sometime tonight.
Yes. So thank you everybody for listening. This has been Diploma Sports, an intelligent intersection of politics and sports. Again, my name is SC. We have Ghost and Steven on the line. Thank you guys, and have a great night.
Yeah, and if you always remember, you can check us out at any of our social media locations that are all in the description below. So everyone, have a good night.
Have a good one.